Right, let me switch my video on so you can see who I am. I won't leave it on all the time if you don't mind, because it will optimize the data usage, and particularly if people are joining us using other devices other than their laptops. So just to welcome everybody here to the Padlet Basics webinar, and thank you so much for joining us and introducing yourselves in the text chat area and also answering Widad's question. So today with me, I do have Widad, and she has been interacting with you quite a bit in the text chat area. And I also have Mashudu as well. So Widad, are you able just to introduce yourself briefly and then hand the mic over to Mashudu just to say hi?
Sure. So, hi everyone. My name is Widad, and I work in online course and curriculum development at SALT, and I love Padlet. I've been researching the uses of Padlet, how to use Padlet with Kath and some other people in our team. So we are so excited to share with you what we know about Padlet, but also to hear from you how you've been using Padlet. Thanks.
Thanks, Widad. Mashudu?
All right. My name is Mashudu, and I am a learning designer. I've just joined SILT very recently, and I've used Padlet as a teacher. I was a teacher, an IT teacher in one of the private schools in Johannesburg. So I've used it from there with the little ones, but I'm really keen on learning how it can be appropriated in a higher education environment as well. Thank you.
Thanks, Mashudu. So I'm going to switch my video off now, but Widad and Mashudu will be watching the text chat. So if you have any questions as we're going along, please just enter those into the text chat area, and Widad and Mashudu will answer those, or they will ask me to answer them verbally. So let's get going with the webinar today. It will be pretty jam-packed, and we've started a few minutes late because we were waiting for our colleagues, which I think was a good thing because we have quite a number with us. But today we're going to go through what is Padlet, what is the Padlet Backpack. We're going to chat a bit about layouts and their use cases. We are also going to be talking about Padlet features. We will then touch on privacy and access issues, and then we will actually find out how to get Padlet into the Vula site. So that's basically what we will be going through today. So first of all, what is Padlet? So Padlet is actually very easy to use. It's very intuitive, and it's an online board. I wouldn't say it is a whiteboard. I would just call it a board, and I think you'll see later on why it is. We'll just call it a board for now because it supports many, many different things. And it is a way to actually encourage collaboration, and it actually comes with a variety of layouts. So layouts are actually like templates, and we'll be speaking a bit more about those today. When students post onto the board, their posts can actually support text, image, video, audio clips, links, uploaded files, and all sorts of other things. So it actually makes the posts quite a bit more interesting than just adding text. You can also add comments on the posts, and you can also add things such as likes or votes. You can add stars, and you can also add grading. So all of these things are optional. You don't have to have comments on or votes on or stars on. You can decide whether you would like to enable that functionality or not. You can have various different levels of privacy and access to your Padlet. It integrates really well within Vula, and you can also actually use it in MS Teams. But today we're going to be focusing on how to get it into your Vula site. And it works really well with any device or any browser. So it's really quite adaptable and flexible. So first, let's chat a little bit about the UCT Padlet Backpack. So what is the backpack? Essentially, the backpack is the UCT licensed instance of Padlet. So some of you that have used Padlet before may have used it in your own individual private capacity, and that is probably a free version. And with the free version, you do get all the functionality. The only constraint and limitation is the number of Padlets that you can actually create at one time. But with the UCT Backpack, which is a licensed version, there is no limit to the number of Padlets that you can create. So the way that you actually get a license is you go to uct.padlet.org. You will then see a pop-up window which will say login with Microsoft. You are going to be integrating this with your UCT profile. So you just use your regular UCT email address and your associated UCT password, and you click sign in. And then on the next screen, you will see a kind of a pop-up that says, please accept the permissions, and you just click on accept, and that will log you straight into the UCT Backpack instance of Padlet. And as I said, that is a licensed instance, and you will be able to use all the functionality, and there's no limitation on the number of Padlets that you are going to be able to create. When your students, just a note, when your students interact on Padlet, if you set it up using the LTI, which we're going to touch on today and show you how to implement that, they will automatically be assigned a UCT Backpack student account as well, the first time that they log in and use Padlet. Do we have any questions at this stage, Widad or Mashudu?
No, not at the moment.
Great, thank you. Right, so we said we're going to be touching on layouts and use cases. So basically, layouts are, if you want to think of them like a template, it's a way of arranging the posts on the Padlet. So Padlet comes with 8 different layouts, or as I said, you can call them templates if you want to. And you can see here that we have wall, canvas, stream, grid, shelf, back channel, map, and timeline. So this just basically gives you an idea of the layout of your posts and some of the associated functionality. But within this, once you have chosen a layout to go with, you can customize it quite a bit. And also, once you've chosen a layout and you find, well, maybe it's not quite working the way you thought it would for your activity that you envisaged, you can actually swap layouts partway through, and your posts will rearrange according to the newly selected layout. So the first layout that we're going to be talking about is the one that is called the shelf. So as you can see here, a shelf basically arranges your posts in columns. So you can have a column heading at the top of each of the columns. You can have unlimited columns which go across the Padlet. So here in this screenshot, we can just see 4 columns, but you can have multiple columns, and all the associated posts will go below the column headings. So you can see the middle 2 columns have scroll bars next to them because they have multiple posts in those columns. So if you're looking for a good way to sort of categorize information and have headings and associated posts within those headings, this is a good layout to go with, and it's called shelf, and you can also move the posts between the different columns. The other nice thing about this is, as you can see the screenshot in the corner, you can decide the position of the posts. So when people add posts to the shelf layout, you can decide if you want the new posts to always go first or if you want the new posts to always go last. So that's just an easy way to sort the order of people adding their posts to this shelf layout. So here at UCT, we actually had somebody using this layout. And I just want to check, is Renee in the room here with us today?
Yes, I am. Yeah.
Great. Would you like to tell us a little bit how you used this layout for your Padlet?
Okay. It happened very fast. We came to the end of the year. Our final year students do a big project, and one of the sessions is a poster session, but of course we couldn't have our poster and presentation session last year. So we got to the end of the year, the students were curious about each other's projects, and we did a very basic poster session where students were encouraged to upload their posters, their you know, it was very easy to use. I don't think it's spectacular, but it was very functional for us. I'm quite keen to try a few new things this year with more time and better planning. But it did the job. Students could put their names down, upload their posters as PDFs, and at the bottom they could comment, they could like each other's posters, and they could do a comment. There's a limitation on the size that you can upload, but it was absolutely adequate for our purposes, and it gave our final year class a way to look at each other's posters, which they were missing out on. So we definitely, if we can't do presentations this year, there's a first semester project course, and we will do something similar. And it really sort of served a good purpose for our students last year, at the end of last year.
Excellent. Thanks so much for that feedback, Renee. And on the next screen, you can see this is another instance that was also used at UCT in the health sciences. I'm not sure, is Sarah in the room here today? I know she was going to try and be here, but she might not be here yet. So Sarah actually used this one. So here you can see she's used it for vaccine narratives, and she's used the same shelf layout, and she's posed questions at the top. So she's used questions, prompt questions as her column headers, and the students have basically added their thoughts and ideas below each of the prompt questions. So this one I think is actually still in progress. This is just a screenshot of where they are at the moment, but this is just another use case of that same layout. So another really nice layout to use is the one which is called Canvas. So Canvas is a very free way of posting the posts onto the board. You can basically just add them anywhere you want to. You can move them around. You can link posts from one to the other. You can decide to have a label on your link if you want to. You can color your posts different colors. Once they're linked, you can move them around as well. So this is a very free kind of layout. And as you can see, you can disconnect from a post as well, and you can reconnect it somewhere else. So it's quite easy, quite intuitive, and a very kind of free format. So in that regard, there was another use case of this one. So Sarah, if you're in the room, please let me know, because you were going to give us a little bit of feedback about this. But this has been used in health sciences as well. And they used this Canvas layout. And as you can see, they've had quite a bit of fun with connecting up all the different bits and pieces. So it's quite easy to use, and you can really kind of mold it and make it do exactly what you want to do in terms of moving the posts around, connecting what you want to, and really adding in all sorts of information. The next type of layout we're going to have a look at is called the wall. So the wall essentially has the posts in, it looks similar to the other one, except you won't see the scroll bars. So it does lay it out in columns, but you can move the stuff between any of the columns that you like. So it stacks it up one next to each other. But as I said, you can drag and drop it anywhere you want to, just to arrange it. But basically it kind of snaps to this brick-like kind of formation. And as you can see, you can add all sorts of information into a wall. So it's really quite ideal for doing things like photos, or even creating kind of collaborative pin boards around topics. You can even do file sharing. You can do quite a lot of different things with this. We use it to introduce students to each other at the start of a course. So it's a quite a structured layout, but it's also very visual as well. So here's a use case where somebody has used a wall layout, but they've used it as a glossary, essentially. So they've asked students to collaboratively create a glossary with an associated image, and they've built up this visual glossary of terms, which also helps to kind of check students' understanding that they've interpreted words correctly. And if you want to, you can also enable comments on these posts as well, so you can elicit more feedback and interaction from the other students, where they can say, yes, I agree with your definition, but I think you've missed an important aspect. I think you should be adding this aspect in as well. The next layout we're going to take a look at is the one that's called Stream. So as you can see, this one is quite different. It's just a single stream of posts that run up and down the center of a page. So it's kind of reminiscent almost of, say, like a social media stream or a feed. And all the posts will just be in one single line. You can, again, drag and drop them into different orders and things like that if you want to, but basically a stream will be one single line. So a potential use case for something like this, just waiting for the slides to come through. All right, I'll just keep on talking while the slides decide to come back again. Might have to unshare and reshare. But basically the slides, here we go, they're back again. Something you can do with this is you could create a reading list. So you could create like an interactive reading list where you listed all the books that were required for a specific course. You could add in links to other resources. You could add in images if you wanted to. You could include a short summary and any other contextual info about the books or the resources. So this is just one use case where you could potentially use a stream layout for an interactive reading list. And the next layout we're going to look at is one that's called Grid. So as the name implies, it snaps the posts to a grid, so sort of like a hidden grid. And you will only get 4 columns across, but you'll get multiple rows. And the height of each of the rows is determined by the height of the largest post in each row. So as you can see here, the third post along is quite tall. So that's given quite a bit of extra space under the other posts. And essentially, if you think of the grid, it would basically be like that, where you can see your 4 columns and your rows going across. So you can have multiple rows, but you will definitely only have 4 columns. This layout is called a timeline, and I'm sure it's pretty self-explanatory. So when you create a timeline, you can add the posts on, and by default, the posts will add on either side of the timeline. So one at the top, one at the bottom, and so on across the page. There's no limit to the amount of posts you can add to your timeline. You can have a very, very long timeline if you wanted to. You will just get a horizontal scroll bar where you'll scroll from left to right. So as you can see, you can include images and other media text onto your posts as well. You can also drag and drop your posts. So if you decide to change the order, you can just move them around and they will automatically snap back into position with one on either side. If you see your timeline on a smaller screen, it is possible that the layout may be slightly different. And instead of getting your posts one above and one below the timeline, you'll get one timeline and all the posts will be on top. But on larger screens, you see posts on either side of the timeline. This layout is called the back channel. It's essentially a chat. So you will have your text input area at the bottom there where you can add your chat messages. The chat will appear on the screen. You can add likes or votes or stars. One thing that you cannot do with this layout is you cannot have comments. So you can't comment on somebody's message. So essentially the text input field is the message area at the bottom. And once you've posted your message, it'll essentially become one long linear line of messages. So you can't really go back to a message that was posted earlier and kind of reply on that message. Each message is its own distinct message that just slots below the one above that. So this is quite useful to use sometimes just for a back channel chat. This layout is very easy. It's called map. So you can decide what kind of underlying map you would like. There's quite a few to choose from. You can do drag and drop of the pins. You can also add comments, and you can add quite a lot of information into the posts that are associated with the pins on the map. So it's quite a useful one to have maybe also at the start of a new course, especially if you have a lot of people joining online and they're not all from South Africa, and you would like to get a sense of where your students are joining you from. It's a nice way, visual way for them to actually represent where they are on the map, to add some information about where they are. And this one, you can add comments. So you can have a bit of interaction on each of the posts which are on the pins on the map. Are there any questions at this stage? Widad or Mashudu?
Yes, Kath, there's 2 questions about the chat channel. So
Sure.
Susan has asked how many people might use the chat channel ideally. And then Martin asks, why use the back channel chat rather than Vula's chat rooms or forums?
Okay, so the one about the limits, in practical terms, there's no limit to the number of people that can be using that tool at any one time. But depending on what it is that you want to discuss and what it is, what the purpose of the activity is, you might want to put a limit on the number of people who effectively engaged in that conversation. If you were just using it for a space where people could just pop by at any stage and just say hi to people or leave a message, and there wasn't some kind of focused topic that you were discussing, then you might not want to put a limit on it. But if there was a specific topic that you really wanted a group of people to discuss in this way, it might be useful to limit that. Martin's question about the use of this as opposed to the other existing tools that are within Vula. So essentially the Vula chat is very similar in layout in that you can't reply to messages, and it's very linear as well. And each message is its own distinct message, which just slots below the previous message. So I agree there, the layout is very similar. The forums within Vula, slightly different focus, because the forums are they're actually in a hierarchical layout, and you can kind of have distinct discussions within forums and forum topics. So you can provide a lot more structure in a forum, and also a forum messages that are posted, you are able to actually reply on that specific post. So it's a lot more structured. So why would you want to use this? Potentially, if you want to say use the voting, the stars, the likes, the grading, you could use that. Another thing that you could potentially use this for would be to you can actually put Padlet, because it resides within Vula, and within Vula you can have content-aware areas. It's potentially possible that you could take this chat feature of the Padlet and put it in a group-aware area, whereas the chat feature within Vula itself is completely open to everybody and is not group aware. It's no way to actually make Vula chat group aware. It's completely open. Even if you have multiple different chat rooms, they're always open to everybody. So if you wanted to have an informal chat space that you potentially only wanted to keep for a group of people, you might potentially want to use this tool.
Great. There's also a question from Susan with regards to WhatsApp chat groups. And after that, there's a question regarding the maps from Gail Cook. She wants to know, are the other maps or just the global one?
Okay, let me go backwards for those two questions. So the maps, there are a variety of different maps. So this is just a very basic one, but you can choose, if you're familiar with Google Maps, where you can choose if you want sort of satellite or street or different kind of maps, you can choose a different underlying map. And you can also change the zoom as well. So if you wanted to just zoom in on a particular place, you could do that as well. So that effectively would change the look and feel of your map. And the other question pertaining to the WhatsApp one was already answered. Okay, all right, great. Thanks, Susan. Right, so now we're going to go on to have a look at some of the features. So you might have already seen some of the features in the use case and the layouts as we were going along, but let's have a little bit of more of an in-depth look at some of the features. So we've already said how you are actually going to get this license. You can actually sign yourself up for a license. And just to recap on that, the way that you do that would be go to uct.padlet.org. You are going to select the login with Microsoft option. When you do that, you will use your UCT credential. So in other words, it's UCT email address and your associated password with that UCT email address, because essentially you're aligning your UCT profile to the UCT licensed backpack instance of Padlet. And once you have entered your email and your associated password, the last step will be to just grant Padlet permission, and you just need to click on accept. And as soon as you do that, you'll be logged into Padlet, and you'll see that it will say University of Cape Town at the top, and you'll be free to start creating your Padlets. Just a note here that some people may already have a free version of Padlet. They may have used Padlet in the past, and when you log in with a UCT version of Padlet, it will detect that you already have a free version. At that stage, it will offer you the option to merge your free version with the UCT instance. I just found it a little bit more useful to actually have two distinct areas, because there may be Padlets that you want to create in your UCT instance that you don't want in your personal instance, and vice versa. So at that stage where it asks you if you would like to merge your personal Padlet free account with your institutional backpack, you are quite free to say no, keep them as two distinct accounts.
Kath, just two
Sure.
quick questions.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to start off with Jackie's question, and that is, what happens if I don't have a UCT address using Yahoo for Vula?
We can still work around that. You might just need to contact us independently by maybe sending a request to help at Vula.
Great. And then a question from Renee. She wants to know, is Padlet going to use students' data, or is it going to be zero rated along with internal Vula tools?
Okay, so this is a third-party tool, although it does embed within Vula. When it comes to thinking about whether something is data-free or not, you always need to think of the source. Where is the source of this tool or this resource or this video or this PDF? Where does it reside? If it resides on Vula, then it is data-free, essentially. But Padlet does not reside on Vula. Padlet embeds within Vula. It actually, Vula provides a view of a Padlet. So the source of Padlet remains on the Padlet website. So by virtue of that, it is not data free. Having said that, we're going to go through a couple of the features now. If you keep your posts, when it comes to text, if you keep them just to text interactions, that will be kind of the base level functionality of putting information onto a Padlet. That does not actually consume a large amount of data. As soon as you start adding far more rich media onto your Padlet, for example, lots and lots and lots of videos or lots and lots of images that might be very high res and just loaded straight off a camera, that potentially would take more data, but not necessarily an excessive amount, because having said that, it's all dependent on the device that a student or person is using to interact with Padlet. Because, for example, if somebody was using their phone to interact with Padlet, it would be optimized for the phone. If someone was using a laptop and viewing the exact same Padlet, it potentially would take a bit more data because it would be optimized for laptop. So it's not data free, and the amount of data depends on the amount of media that you have on your board. Right, so once you've logged into the UCT Backpack, you will essentially see this kind of layout, and the quickest way to actually get going with making a Padlet is just clicking the top left-hand button there that says Make a Padlet. So once you've done that, you will see this familiar layouts option where you can choose which layout you would like to start with. So remember, a layout is like a template, and if you choose the wrong one to start with, don't be too worried, because even if you actually have posts on your Padlet, you can always change the layout partway through. So you can swap to different layouts and experiment and see what works best for you. So to start a Padlet, you definitely need to select one of these layout options. The one which might be the most sort of nice to play with if you're just starting out with this would be the one called Canvas. Right, so once you've chosen a layout, Widad, do you have any more questions?
Yes, Kath. There is a demonstration question from Gail. She wanted to know how to change a layout from a specific one that's already been created.
Okay, I do have that a little later on, once I've gone through how to actually get content onto the slide. So it'll be okay if I show you then at that stage.
All right, thanks, Kath.
Thanks for that. Right, so once you have elected to create a Padlet, it will actually give you a blank Padlet like this and a very random background. So all of these things, as I said, are very customizable. So the first thing that will pop up will be this pane on the right-hand side, which is says modify, and here will be all the elements that you can actually modify to change the look and the feel of your particular Padlet. So we're going to have a look at each of these elements. So on the right-hand side there in the modify pane, if we go a little bit closer, the first thing, it will actually give it a default title. So the Padlet titles are quite kind of elaborate and ornate and quite fun, but I'm sure if you are creating a Padlet for a specific purpose, you might want to give it a more relevant title. So this is where you will add in your title. The description, it's not mandatory, it's completely optional. That will be displayed in smaller text below the title. If you don't want to have a description, you can leave it out. Some people use this description area to provide kind of brief instruction as to how they want the participants to engage on the Padlet. So you can use it or not, it's up to you. Below that, you have an option to add an icon. This is also completely optional. So it does give you a palette of icons to choose from, and you can even add your own icon if you want to. And then the next thing below the icon there, you can see address. So the address is the unique link to your Padlet. So it's essentially the web address to your Padlet. So in other words, it's the URL. So when you create a Padlet, by default, it'll give you a URL that is quite unique, and it'll just be a random collection of sort of numbers and characters. And it's not always that memorable. So at this stage, you do have a chance to actually customize the URL, which will be the link essentially to your Padlet. So in this one, I've just done sample_test. So you can choose anything and maybe align it to the title of your Padlet that you're actually creating. So these settings are all under modify, and you can get back to these settings at any stage by clicking the cogwheel at the top right-hand corner of your Padlet. And if you change anything on this modify pane, please remember to use the save button at the top to save your changes. Another thing you can modify is the appearance. So you can change the wallpaper. So the wallpaper is essentially the background of your Padlet. You can change the wallpaper, you can change the color scheme to light or dark, and you have 4 fonts to choose from. In terms of the wallpaper, you've got quite an assortment to choose from. So you can choose from solid colors, gradients, textures and patterns, or pictures, or you can add your own wallpaper. So anything that you would like to upload in the form of an image, you can actually put into the background. And once you've added your own wallpaper, you can also decide if you wanted to fill the whole available Padlet space, or you can have it tiled, which essentially puts multiple versions of a smaller picture all over the background of your Padlet. Another way you can customize your Padlet is decide if you would like to have attribution. So attribution is whether or not the author's name will be displayed above each post. So by default, it is off, but you can switch that on. Now remember that in order to have attribution and get the person's name who's actually posting, that person needs to be identifiable by their profile. So we'll talk a bit more about this later on, but basically once you put your Padlet into Vula and it's integrated within Vula, it'll pick up the student's profile that they've logged into Vula with, and that is how it will attribute their name to their post. However, if you would like to have posts anonymous for whatever reason, maybe you're doing a particular activity where you specifically want anonymous posts, you would just leave this off. You can decide where you would like your new posts to be positioned, either first on the Padlet or last on the Padlet. Remember, you can also drag and drop any of the posts so you can manually rearrange them as well. You can decide if you would like to have comments. So comments means that other students are able to post a response or a reply below each post that is on the board. So if you had or was trying to have a discussion and you had posts and you would like to have other students comment or respond or reply on those posts, then you would enable the comments and you could build up a bit of a discussion around each of the posts. You can also decide to enable reactions if you want to. So under reactions, you can choose to have likes. So likes are essentially you just click a little heart to say, I like this post. You can have votes, which are like thumbs up and thumbs down. You can have stars, which are a rating from 1 to 5 stars, or you can have a grade. So you can decide for the grading, if you would like what the maximum amount you would like to make that grading out of. And at the moment, just to let you know that this grading does not integrate with Vula Gradebook. So it's distinct on the Padlet itself. It's just if you would like to attribute a value to a post. All of these are optional and you can leave them off if you want to.
Kath, there are
Sure.
a few questions in the chat. Carla asks, with the vote function, can you have more than 2 options for an answer?
Are you talking more than just thumbs up and thumbs down? Because once you enable the voting, the option is you just get either the thumbs up or the thumbs down. Those are the only 2 options that you get.
Okay.
Can I ask a follow-up? So, because is there then, maybe not now, but later on, is there a way to then use the Padlet function to do more like a poll then? So maybe vote is not the right function. Or is that
yeah no, so you would at the moment, it's just almost like a yes no, like
okay.
yes, I agree, like a vote might be a slightly, that's the terminology they use, but yeah, it's essentially thumbs up and thumbs down.
Okay, all right, thank you.
And there's another question from Stephen. Can you have more than one template embedded within a single Padlet as pages in a single document?
No, you can't have multiple layouts or templates in one Padlet, but what some people do is they create one Padlet, and then within that Padlet, on one of the posts or the area where they're actually putting information, they create a link to another Padlet. So you can create a link on one Padlet that kicks open another Padlet essentially. So it's not quite what you have asked for, but it is a way that you can almost like extend the functionality of a single Padlet by linking it to another one, and the secondary and the third Padlet, etc., could all be different layouts. All right, any more questions at this stage?
No, I think we can proceed.
Great, thanks, Mashudu. Right, so another thing that you can do is content filtering. So here you can do, it's almost like moderation. So you can have require approval, and you can also decide to filter profanity as well. So with the approval, just to note that essentially this is, I would say, like moderation. So once a student has posted something, it will not go onto the board for everybody to see until you, as the Padlet owner, has actually approved that, or if you don't approve it, then you delete it. So just a consideration around this is that if you have a lot of students and you have put this onto your board, make sure that you have the time set aside to actually be reading through and approving these posts. Because there aren't any alerts that you receive from Padlet. So when new posts arrived, you won't be notified. So if you have this on your Padlet, you will have to check back really regularly and have the available time and capacity to be checking through the posts and approving them. However, it might be a tactic that you might want to use. For example, if you ask a prompt question and you wanted all the students to answer it, but you didn't want the students to be influenced by each other's answers. So you wanted them all to see what the prompt question was, submit a response, but not let them see what other people's responses are. You could potentially use this feature, and then at a certain time, once everybody had responded, make all of the posts, like approve them all, so they all became visible. So there's just different ways you could potentially use that. Right, privacy and access. Privacy and access, actually two different things. So privacy, you'll see there are 4 different categories there. There's private, password, secret, and org-wide. So the one which I would actually recommend would be secret. Private means that that Padlet is just for you. It's not shared with anybody. You haven't made the link to the Padlet available. It's only for you. So this is potentially maybe while you're setting up your Padlet, or maybe experimenting or thinking about how to do something, you would want to keep it private. Password is pretty self-explanatory. If you want to make your Padlet available, what you could do is put a password on there and just distribute the password to those people who you wanted to access it. So that's one kind of measure of control. Secret means it has a URL, and whoever you distribute this URL to, they will be able to see your Padlet. And org-wide means, because you're now using UCT Backpack, which is the licensed instance of Padlet, everybody who belongs to the UCT instance will be able to see anything where you have put the attribute org-wide. So if you want the entire UCT to be able to see your Padlet, that is the one that you would want to select. But I'm guessing most people probably don't want to go that broad. So the option would be to choose secret. So that is a privacy level to choose. Then in terms of access, there's 3 access levels. So you can have read, write, and edit. The recommended one here would be write, because you want your students to be able to post to the board. So they need to be able to write to the board. Read obviously means that they can just view it as an observer. There's no interaction. And edit means that you're actually giving that person the right to approve other people's posts and even edit other people's posts. So you probably don't want to be giving that level of access to students. So the recommended one for students would be secret and can write. Under the share section on your Padlet, you'll also find where you can copy the link to your particular Padlet, and also an area where you can add to your LMS as an external tool, and that's how you'll actually get it into Vula. So out of the share section, these are the 2 areas that you would probably use most, either copying the link, which will be a direct link to your Padlet, or using the option there to add it to the LMS, which is Vula in this instance, as an external tool. You also have the option to export your Padlet. So you can see you've got various formats here. So you've got image, PDF. So just a note about those is obviously a Padlet is quite interactive. Once it becomes an image, it is then almost like a static screenshot. So if you have Padlets which kind of run very far down the page, or maybe have a lot of content in that you can't see all at once without opening or expanding the posts, if you take a screenshot, you will not capture that part that you're actually not seeing on the screen at the time. So that's just a bit of a limitation if you have a lot of information in your posts. Similarly, with a PDF as well, it will actually create a PDF which is a snapshot image of what you can see on your screen at the time. The CSV and the Excel spreadsheet, basically what that does is takes the post itself and puts that into a spreadsheet export with the author's name. But it does not also put the comments there. So if you've enabled comments and people have added their comments onto the post, and there's been quite a bit of discussion, that comment, any of those comments are not actually exported in the CSV or the spreadsheet. So it's just the initial original post and the author's name and the timestamp. And print obviously does the same thing as, say, an image or a PDF. It'll give you the snapshot of what you can see on your screen at the time. So these are ways to actually save your or make your Padlet portable, but with considerations around what you've actually got on your Padlet at the time. Right, we had a question earlier on as to where do you change the format. So the place where you're going to change your format is under the, there's 3 dots at the top right-hand corner of your Padlet. And when you click those 3 dots there, you will see this drop-down menu. And some of these are duplicates of some of the other functions that you can find under the modify and share and access and privacy. But here you will see the change format. It's the 3rd one from the bottom there. And that is where you can actually decide to change the format of your layout. So you can swap between, say, canvas and wall, or go to something else. And the other important one to note here is remake. So if you've created a Padlet and you want to use a similar layout or even a similar activity, but with another group of students, and you don't want to recreate your Padlet from scratch, you can use the remake option, which essentially makes a copy of that Padlet, and you can elect to remove all of the posts. So you won't have the individual contributions, that'll be removed, but the other attributes that you've put onto your Padlet will be duplicated. And another important element to note here is the one right down the bottom, which says archive. So archive means that it will still remain under your profile, but it will be kind of like inactive. So your students won't be able to access it. So if you want to archive something for a certain period of time, you can archive it. It will be inactive, inaccessible by the students. And then if you want to, you can choose to take it out of the archive and make it active again. Right, so how will your students add posts? It's pretty easy and very intuitive. You'll see on any Padlet at the bottom, it's usually at the bottom right-hand corner. On some of the layouts, it's at the top right-hand corner. You'll see a round pink circle with a cross on it. And once you click on that, you can add a post. Another way to add a post is just to double-click anywhere on the blank background wallpaper area of your Padlet. And then you can type in your text. You can also apply some basic formatting. You can also change the background color of your text. And as you saw earlier on, you can also connect, depending on which layout you've used. If you've used the canvas layout, you can connect your posts together with the arrows. And what can students include into their posts? There's a variety of different media that they can add in. And we've had a bit of discussion around this. And the more media you add, obviously, it will add a bit more data. But you can actually upload images, you can add links, you can take photos and add them in, you can add videos, you can actually record your voice or upload voice clips, you can do little drawings, you can add pins like you saw on the map, and you can actually link to other Padlets, which was something we mentioned just a few minutes ago. So those are the different type of posts and the features that you can actually add into your posts. And just to remember that the more media that you add, the more data potentially it will consume. Right, so once you've created your Padlet, how do you get it into your Vula site? So there's a number of ways you can do this, and you can basically add it onto a lesson page or a sub-lesson page, or you can add it through site setup. So there's two ways to get it into Vula. One is a straight, what I'd call an embed of the URL. So remember, that was the distinct link to your Padlet where you could customize the end portion of that link. You can embed that straight into a lessons page within Vula. And the other way to do it would be to use the LTI, either through the external tool or the learning app. The difference between these two is if you take a URL and you just embed it in to Vula, it will not necessarily know who is interacting on that Padlet. If you use the LTI method, that will make the students create a Padlet account the first time they interact with a Padlet, and by virtue of that, it will be able to pick up on their Vula profile and provide attribution to their posts if you've enabled that. So embedding a URL will not pick up their profiles. However, using the LTI approach will give the students a Padlet account and pick up with their Vula profile. Right, so let's just show you the first way, which is embedding it as a URL, because there might be instances where you're not really particularly worried about knowing who posted what, and you just want to get your Padlet into Vula in a quick and easy way. So the way to do this basically is, remember that you're now working between Padlet and Vula, and you want to link your Padlet to display within Vula. So you need to be going between these two tools. So you start off in Padlet, and in the share options, you are going to select that one which says copy the link to the clipboard. So this link is now on your clipboard, and then you go into Vula. In Vula, on a lessons page, you will then go to embed content on the page. In the little window that pops up where it says embed content on the page, you will see there's a field there that says add the embed code or the URL. So that is where you would paste that link that would be on your clipboard at this stage. So you paste it in there. Then the next thing you do is you're going to click the save button, but it's not going to put the Padlet in immediately. You then need to also click the button next to that that says try other alternative, and then the Padlet will be displayed in that little window, and then you click save. So you do need to click save, then try other alternative, and then save again. And once you've done that, your Padlet will be embedded onto your lessons page or lesson sub page. But remember, this one does not pick up the student's profile. It's just a quick way to get your Padlet into Vula. The next way that you can actually do it, and this is using the external tool LTI, is to go through site setup. So remember, in order to access site setup, you must either be a site owner in Vula or you must be a support staff. So once you access site setup, you're going to scroll all the way down until you see the external tool checkbox. You click that and then click the continue button. On the next page, you will then give a title to your external tool. So you can add anything you want to in there for your title. Remember, you can always change your title at a later stage if you decide you want to. And then you click the continue button. And then on the final page, you will just click finish. So it's site setup, select external tool, continue, give your tool a name, continue, and then finish. Once you've done that, your lessons page, your external tool page will open up, and you'll see your title there, but you'll see a message that says this tool has not yet been configured. And that's because we haven't yet linked it to our Padlet. So this is the next step that comes in of linking the Padlet to this external tool. So essentially what you've done here is you've just made the tool available in Vula. Now you're going to link your Padlet to this tool. So at this point, you are going to go back to Padlet. And you're going to use that option there that says add to your LMS as an external tool. Now, because you are adding this as an LTI and it is going to recognize the profile of the student, there are several fields that you're going to have to link so that Padlet can actually read the student's profile. So essentially, there are 4 areas within Padlet that you need to carry across to Vula. So the left-hand side of the screen here is what you would see in Vula, and the right-hand side of your screen here is what you would need to grab from your Padlet and bring across into the Vula space. So the first thing you need is that remote tool URL. So that is the one at the top there. In Padlet, it's called the launch tool URL. So you would copy that across. So the green one in the Padlet goes across to Vula in the green field there. The next one you would need would be the remote tool key, and you get that from Padlet under consumer key, and you copy that across into the space in Vula. The next one you copy across is the remote tool secret, and in Padlet it's called shared secret. So you copy that and you paste it into the field in Vula. You do need to put in a button text and a tool title. So you can just add in Padlet if you want to, because you can always customize them later on, or you can just pick your own text that you would like to use at that point. At the bottom, you do also need to put 2 check marks into send names to the external tool and send email addresses to the external tool. And that's so that Padlet, which is the external tool, knows who the student is. And then the final thing you need to do is the custom launch parameters, and they are outlined in pink there on the right-hand side in Padlet. You just copy that and you paste it into the custom launch parameters, and then you finally click update options. Another way that you can also add it as LTI, but on a lessons page, is you can use the add content, add learning app. You would then select the button that says manage or install tools. And on the right-hand side, near the top, you'll see something that says install LTI. And it's essentially the same steps that we've just outlined previously. It's just that the layout within Vula is slightly different. So you're still going to pull across those 4 areas, the launch tool URL, the consumer key, the shared secret, and the custom parameters. You're still going to pull across those 4 things from Padlet into Vula. It's just that they're in a slightly different place on the page. So the steps are the same, and you finally just click save. And that will actually add your Padlet into Vula. I know we've gone quite fast through that, but as I said, the recording and this the slides will be made available to you. But do we have any questions at this stage, Mashudu or Widad?
Yes, we had a few questions, but we did manage to answer them in the chat. But there's one from Helen. Can multiple colleagues design a Padlet page?
Yes. Are you saying can multiple people work together collaboratively to actually set something up for the students? Then the answer is yes. Any other further questions at this stage?
I think we did manage to answer them, but if you'd like to add to what we did say, I'll just read them out quickly. Helen asked, how could you grade participation? And I basically took a screenshot of the participation, of the reactions from the reactions button under settings, where one can actually add the grading function. So I don't know if you would like to add more to that.
No, that's fine. So you can enable the grading, yes, and you can choose what the maximum amount would like to be. And the only thing is that once you enable grading, anybody that's participating on the Padlet can then attribute a grade. So if you've enabled grading on your Padlet, all your students can grade each other, essentially. So it's the same level of functionality and interaction as, say, the thumbs up or down or the stars or the likes. Everybody has access to that.
And there was a question from Carla on when will LTI be available?
You can actually, these steps that I've outlined here, if you follow those steps, that is how you would get it into Vula at the moment. If you need some assistance with getting those sort of custom parameters and the URLs and the codes and whatnot from your Padlet into Vula, then you are perfectly welcome to send an email to help@Vula.
Okay, there's another question from Martin. If you add Padlet via site setup, do you need to add new instances for each Padlet that you create?
Yeah, so if you go to, if you're going via site setup and you're adding it as an external tool, yes, if you wanted to have multiple Padlets like that, yes, and you were using that LTI integration, each one would be its own external tool. Yes, correct, Martin.
I'm not sure what Helen was asking here. How would they do this? Helen, I'm not sure as to whether you want to elaborate further on what that follow-up question was on, or the multiple colleagues, Kath.
Oh, okay. So what you can do is, because in the same way that you can make your Padlet available to students, remember there's those privacy and access settings. So you could share the URL before you sharing it with your students. You could actually share the URL to your colleagues and say, let's all collaborate on this. So imagine the same way that you almost share in Google Docs or Google Slides. It's the same level of sharing there. You would just send them the URL to your distinct Padlet and make sure that they had access to write on your Padlet, and you would all have the same level of interaction and functionality on that Padlet and be able to write there together.
Okay, and the last question, do we have to use Padlet inside Vula?
You do not have to use it inside Vula, no. The advantage of using it within Vula is if you wanted to leverage the LTI functionality, which actually picks up on the profile of the student. Also, once you've done that and the first time the student arrives on a Padlet, which has been added via LTI, they will also be assigned a Padlet UCT Backpack licensed account. So you can use it externally if you want to. You would just then have to basically distribute the URL to anybody that you wanted to be able to participate. And if they pasted that URL into any web browser, they would get straight to your Padlet. So remember that your Padlet actually resides within the Padlet, the UCT Backpack instance online within your, accessible via your web browser. And Vula provides a view into that and further integration through LTI to align to a student's profile.
Thank you, Kath. There's one last question that popped up. Can you use Padlet for small groups where facilitators can design it for their group within a site?
Yes, so in terms of grouping, Padlet itself, Padlet itself doesn't really provision for groups. I suppose a way that you could just make it for one distinct group just using Padlet's functionality would be to maybe put a password on it and then only distribute the password to that group of people. But what you could do is, if you're using it within Vula, you can actually leverage Vula's grouping functionality. So if you had group-aware content on your lessons page, you could actually put your Padlet within that group-aware item on the page. So you could leverage Vula's grouping functionality to actually make Padlets available to distinct groups of students. Okay, I'm going to pop a URL into the text chat here, and this is just a Padlet that's completely open. As you can see, we are not using it within Vula. You are going to be going straight to it in the web browser. So if you would like to play around on there, it doesn't matter what you do on there. I don't mind at all. But see if you would like to add some posts, you can try adding videos or images, adding links, all sorts of things. You are welcome to do that in that Padlet playground. We will distribute these resources to you, the slides and the video of this webinar. So thanks very much for being here today. Thank you to Widad and Mashudu for so efficiently dealing with all the questions in the text chat. Appreciate you both for doing that. Thank you very, very much. And thank you to everybody for being here.